Hey there, LBT Squad, I'm your host Alex Pop, and I was just thinking, it's been a while since the last top 10 list on this show. I know there are a few of you guys who are waiting for the top 10 songs and whatnot, but a few of those, along with other videos, I plan on bringing out in a certain order. But one that I think I can do now is ranking the many voices of Littlefoot. Now, more actors have lent their voice to Littlefoot than any other character in the series. Whereas most of the primary characters may have had 2 or 3 voice actors throughout the series, Littlefoot has had 9. With all the time the franchise has spanned, they've just kept outgrowing the part. Sarah, Ducky, Petrie, and Spike all have voices that their actors can easily adjust to even with age. With little boy characters like Littlefoot or Bambi or Nemo, you need an actual child actor. There's no substitute. Fortunately, though, they aren't very hard to find, and we're going to be counting down all the voices of Littlefoot from number 9 to number 1. Starting with my least favorite of them all at number 9, Arens Spann from The Land Before Time 11 Invasion of the Tiny Sauruses. What puts him at the bottom of the list is that through the whole movie, it sounds like Littlefoot has a cold. And in scenes where he's straining or yelling, such as when he falls through the tree sweet tree, he sounds rather uninvested. Ah, I'm falling, whatever, ah. So it's not a very big surprise that Arens Spann hasn't done voice work in any movie since The Land Before Time 11. In short, his performance wasn't all that spick and span. Up one slot to number 8, Brandon LaCroix in The Land Before Time 5, The Mysterious Island. He also had stuffiness in his voice that was similar to that of Arens Spann, except it was more tolerable. The sound of it didn't make my eyes water. Still, as much as I love The Mysterious Island, the casting of Brandon LaCroix was one of the weaker aspects of it, though you could tell he put more effort into it than Arens Spann. But also like Arens Spann, he was nowhere in film after voicing Littlefoot. That is until last year, when he was in a Harry Potter fan film called Severus Snape and the Marauders. So again, not necessarily a bad performance, he was just miscast. Number 7. Cody Arens, from the TV series and The Land Before Time 13, The Wisdom of Friends. Like Brandon LaCroix, his overall performance was adequate, but he just wasn't the right choice. The problem is that although Cody Arens was 13 years old at the time, as most of Littlefoot's actors were, he sounded much younger. His voice is the highest out of all 9. I've seen a few internet comments that said they spent years thinking that Littlefoot was a girl. If they had only seen The Wisdom of Friends on the TV series, I would honestly believe them. So the highest is the 3rd lowest. Now here's where they start to get good. At number 6 is Alec Medlock from The Land Before Time 10, The Great Lonic Migration. His performance was a pretty decent embodiment of the character. There are a couple of highs and lows worth noting. The lows are his singing voice, which wasn't the best, and an occasional line that for whatever reason comes out kind of weird, such as when Littlefoot and his grandparents are climbing the crater edge, and he says, "We're almost there." It sort of sounds like his really long throat filled up with phlegm. The highs are emotional moments, such as at the end when he says to his dad, "I'm really happy I finally found you." He legitimately sounds choked up, which is what helps place him above the previous 3. Number 5 is the newest of the bunch, Felix Avitia from The Land Before Time 14, Journey of the Brave. After the 8-year gap between movies 13 and 14, casting director Susan Blue found a great voice for bringing the character back to life. What I liked most about him was that every once in a while, you could hear an ever so slight amount of huskiness in his voice that made Littlefoot sound like he had aged. Which does make sense, because if you watched Felix's most recent interviews, well...
I think it would be Spirit Egg for me, because I got to act like a president. So why not?
Yeah, he's hit the voice break, so Journey of the Brave may be his only Land Before Time movie. Still, great job on his part. Number 4, Thomas Dekker from The Land Before Time 6 through 9. He really shined as Littlefoot, at least in movies 6 through 8. He gave the character emotion, innocence, and sincerity. Additionally, he gets points as the stand-in for Brandon LaCroix as Littlefoot's singing voice in The Mysterious Island, the highlight, of course, being his solo in the song Always There. The reason I don't place him higher on the list is because I think he stayed on for one movie too many. He was 15 years old at the time he did Journey to Big Water, and it kinda shows. Most of the time in that movie it sounds like a teenager trying to imitate a prepubescent. You know what's funny is hearing Thomas Dekker now. You might have seen him in TV shows like The Secret Circle or Terminator the Sarah Connor Chronicles. His voice goes from Littlefoot
If we found that stone in cold fire, everyone could see it for themselves.
to being really husky and gravelly.
Well, maybe we could do something on a less pressure-filled night.
Like a date?
Yeah. Like a date.
He sounds like he could be a future Batman, doesn't he? Though after seeing The Secret Circle, I have a bone to pick with him, because in that show, he got together with Britt Robertson. Well, for right now, I'll be fair and keep him at number 4 on the list. Number 3 is Nick Price. Despite the fact that The Land Before Time 12, The Great Day of the Flyers, is the only movie where Littlefoot is a supporting character, Nick Price did a really good job in the parts the character had. His lackluster singing voice notwithstanding, his inflections always seemed natural, and he never sounded like he was straining to sound like Littlefoot. And he put sincerity into the character, especially in the scene where Littlefoot defends Petrie while talking to Grandpa. So I'd say, out of all the voices of Littlefoot in the later installments, Nick Price did the best job in capturing the spirit of the earlier actors. Speaking of whom, number 2 on the list is now 41-year-old Gabriel Damon, from the original Land Before Time. What can you say about him? He was excellent as Littlefoot in every phase he goes through. He gave him his wide-eyed personality in the early parts, confused sadness when his mother died, his anger and annoyance with Sarah in the second act, and you could hear the determination in his voice when he plots to defeat the Sharptooth and avenge his mother. I really got no complaints. Gabriel Damon was pitch perfect through and through. And so, that leaves the number 1 voice of Littlefoot to be Scott McAfee from The Land Before Times 2 through 4. While Gabriel Damon would be the most likely candidate for the top spot, seeing how he was the first and probably the one to go to for reference, personally, I like Scott McAfee the most. Once again, I'm free of criticisms with his performance. He had all the qualities and emotion of Gabriel Damon, he sounded just masculine enough, his singing voice is solid, and I gotta say, whenever I'm reading a Land Before Time fanfic, or am imagining like Littlefoot in a non-existent movie, his voice is always the one that comes to my mind. So very close call, but I have to name Scott McAfee as the best voice of Littlefoot. And that concludes this countdown. As you can see, there have been many voices of Littlefoot, and if the series continues, there's bound to be many more. And I'm open to seeing what young lad out there might be able to give life to the character like those before him. One more thing I'd like to bring up is, it would be so cool to see Gabriel Damon or Scott McAfee return to voice Littlefoot as an adult, if the series ever came around to Littlefoot and his friends growing up. Actually, what would be even more interesting is if Thomas Dekker came back. Then you could think of it this way: Littlefoot grows up to have the voice of Batman. Isn't that a concept? That's a wrap for now. If you liked this and you want to see more, slap the like button, subscribe for future videos, and follow us on Facebook. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Alex Pop. Catch you later.